Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts from around the world on subjects such as leadership, how you show up at work, communication skills, and diversity, and much, much more. Before I get started talking about our guest, I'd like to invite you to see how your presentation skills are doing. And you can find that out by taking our free 4-minute quiz at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where you are strong in your presentation skills and where perhaps a little bit of support could get you the results you need and the recognition that you deserve. My guest today is Jennie Lopez-Reed. We are broadcasting this during Latinx Heritage Month, and she is one of the very exciting Latinx leaders that I get to interview. Jennie Lopez embodies bring yourself to work in everything that she does. She empowers diversity and engages employees and organizations to achieve new highs. Her superpower is her authenticity. She realized that her strengths are a combination of her Latinx heritage, her passions, and learnings from being a mother. Intentionally using her strengths has been the secret towards her personal and professional successful growth journey. Jennie's originally from Puerto Rico and moved to the U.S. to complete her master's degree in chemical engineering. Her engineering career includes roles in both manufacturing and quality, where she was a site head, and also on the business side as a global brand leader, senior leader, chief operating officer. She's currently the associate VP and head of global recruiting and talent acquisition for a large pharmaceutical company. And she's also an executive board member for the Organization of Latinx at the company, which focuses on developing and accelerating Latinx talent. In 2021, Jennie Lopez joined the board of directors for Genesis Research. At the same time, she has found success with her dancing and her fitness careers. Her experiences include being a backup dancer for artists like Julio Iglesias and Ednita Navarro, TV shows, Super Bowl winning NFL cheerleader and cheerleader captain, fitness instructor, presenter, and Zumba master trainer. And one of the things that I love about Jennie is that she combines a full-time executive career with dancing and teaching fitness. Why not? Jennie is the author of the recently launched book, Intentional Unicorn. She's also a featured author in the book, Hispanic Stars Rising, Volume 2. She's frequently invited as a guest speaker at many local and national organizations and was awarded the 2020 Working Mother of the Year award. She enjoys making intentional, fun memories with her family, Brad, Izzy, and Ethan. They are the why and the fuel for all that she does. After many years of working hard to hide her unicorn horn, she realized that that's where the magic takes place. She's now proud of being an intentional unicorn and empowers everyone to do the same. So let's go to the interview with Jennie Lopez, the unicorn who is intentional about it. I know you'll enjoy it. Jennie Lopez, I'm so excited to have met you. And we just met, introduced by my friend Oscar Garcia, who was the guest three episodes ago. So, but wow, you are awesome. I'm so glad we met. Welcome.
I am so excited. Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.
Yes, and one of the things that I have a whole list of questions to ask you, but before we get started, let me ask you, who would be your dream interview? If you could interview someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Not to dive into religion, but personally, in my journey, I have been able to reconnect with Jesus. So I will say it's Jesus. He is the perfect definition of love. And as I continue to work on me personally and continue to be best judgy, best, more loving, more forgiving, I will have so many questions to ask him. And I know there's a lot documented in the Bible, but just having that opportunity to face ask him for more practical ways on how to become a better person, it will be him.
Wow, that's wonderful. And I just keep thinking, the Bible was written by men, not by women, because women weren't taught to read or write at that point. But, the Bible, what we know of the Bible is other people's interpretation. So who knows what he really did say?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
Well, boy, that would be an interesting one. Good for you. I'd be very curious. So, Jennie, you've written a book called Intentional Unicorn. You have a website called Intentional Unicorn. You've got to tell us the story. Where did that come from?
It's actually a funny story. I was invited to a senior leadership program a couple of years ago. And one of the first things that they had us to do was to grab a piece of paper, a couple of markers, and they said, if you will have to write your memoir, what would it be? Draw a picture and then title it. And everybody got so excited about it. And at the beginning, I froze. But then I said, the first thing that came to my mind was to draw like a silhouette. And that silhouette of that person was me. And I put a little bit of a line in the middle. Half of it was my professional me. So imagine all black and white. I had my glasses, my hair was down, professional attire. I had my heels. On the other side, I put colors. That was my dancing me, the artistic side of me. It was even striking a dancing pose. And I had like a very high ponytail. And when I looked at it, I giggled and I said, that ponytail looks like a horn, like a unicorn. And then I started reflecting myself, yes, I am a unicorn, but I'm intentional because for the longest time, I really thought I didn't fit in any aspect of my life. As an engineer, I was the bubbly one. As a dancer, I was the nerdy one. And I always tried to hide that side of me, when in fact, all of those sides of me is what makes me me. And I do believe that all of us are unicorn. And we try so hard to hide the horn, to minimize it, to knock it down because we want to fit the norm. But whenever we really put a flashlight and highlight that horn that makes us, that's where magic happens. That's whenever we can operate at our best. And the funny thing is that the day after, and I didn't know this part, we went back to the training and I thought, okay, that memoir exercise was funny and let's just put it apart. We had a special guest and they say, you have to do a show and tell now. And I said, for a special guest, the special guest, Elizabeth, was the CEO of the company. And I'm thinking, there comes my career, because all of my peers were very deep in terms of the problems they wanted to solve, the community impact they were going to have. And I have here my intentional unicorn, but I'm sure the CEO remembers mine.
Yes.
From that entire event. And then a year after, during the pandemic, we have an event that is very similar to a tech talk. And I remember one of the training facilitators said, you know what, from all of those memoirs, the one that stuck with me, that message was yours. Will you be interested in doing a keynote in that event? And I was very humble. My keynote ended up being the closing keynote of the entire event. And I got so much feedback, not about me, about the message, about how finally somebody's saying the things that nobody says. Somebody's speaking up loud. And Jennie, I connected to your message. I wish I would have heard that earlier in my career, or I wish there were more people talking about it. And that started seeding that idea of one day writing a book to continue to amplify the message. And here I am.
I love this. I love this. And you are, besides having a full-time important corporate job, you also send out tips to people, and you've got
Yes.
the book and the whole unicorn side of you. And you have a dancing career on the side. When do you ever sleep?
I sleep. If I don't sleep, Elizabeth, I will not be functional.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you combine the work and the life part, and how do you mesh that together?
That is a really good question. I am a very big believer of filling my cup.
Mm-hmm.
All of us, especially women.
You fill your cup. Okay.
I fill my cup. And we are like a cup that keep giving and giving and giving. And if we don't replenish that cup, we get dry.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I fill my cup is through dancing and fitness. And that's something that I have started since I was a little kid. Backup dancer of different artists in Puerto Rico, TV show, even here in the United States, NFL cheerleading, working for the company Zumba as a presenter and education specialist for them. But that's how I fill my cup. So I don't see it as a different job. That's what fills my creative side. Mm-hmm. I do teach still fitness classes twice a week, and mm-hmm. I do that after work. I do that. Again, I go back to my favorite word, intentional. You have to be very intentional with how you organize your day, on how you protect your mindset from the moment you wake up. Mm-hmm. Having not your to-do list, but what are the big main rocks that you have to tackle that week to continue to move the needle. And it takes mm-hmm. a lot of proactive work, and be very choosy of your yeses.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Very choosy what you say yes to.
Yes.
I love that. When you talk about authenticity and getting your voice heard, tell us a little bit about that and how that works.
Being your authentic self. I learned that lesson through my career, because when I moved to the United States, I really thought, when I looked around and I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me. Mm-hmm. And then the feedback I was getting, I would get feedback, Elizabeth, like, Jennie, you have to dress like an engineer, which I didn't know what that meant, because I was working in a manufacturing floor. So it's not that I could wear.
So you're a chemical engineer.
I am a chemical engineer
working on the manufacturing for yes. a large pharma company.
Yes, no heels, no dresses, no jewelry, and still got the feedback that I needed to dress like an engineer. Which what I did was that I went from colors to black, white, and gray, because that's what I saw around me. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to fit in. I didn't want to stand out. Got the feedback about enunciating my words. I got the feedback about slowing down, being less bubbly. Jennie, you have to be very careful about first impressions because you don't look smart. I got the feedback about toning it down, about being too nice, and they didn't know if they could trust me with a difficult job. And you keep adding that kind of feedback, then I thought there's something wrong with me. And when I look around and the lack of representation, I said the only way for me to have a success and get to the goals that I want to get is to change who I am and fit in. And maybe if I dress like her, if I talk like him, if I am more like command and control, very different from who I am as a person, maybe that was it. But that's not the formula for success. Nobody wins. The company gets 50% you, perhaps, 50% of confuse you. And for you as a person, it's so draining. It's almost like you are playing a character in a movie, memorizing the lines, trying to behave a certain way. And all of that energy goes into being somebody who you're not, instead of channeling all of that energy to give the best of you and focusing on the problem to solve, on the people that you're serving. And when that clicked, I say, Jennie, when you are at your best is whenever you're your bubbly self, your energetic self, the way you connect with people. And I said, I'm going to become that role model I didn't have. So it was so freeing whenever you are very intentional with it. And the reason I say intentional is because every strength, if it's overused, it can play against you. It can be a derailer. Everybody has to be very careful about how to intentionally using your strengths. And if your strengths look different from what the norm has been for so many years, then it's an artful balance.
It's a balance.
Yes.
Oh, that leads me exactly to my next question, because a lot of the work I do is helping women be heard, helping women get their voices heard. And often it's because you've got to speak a language that people will understand.
Yes.
So finding the balance between being your authentic you and still being understood, or speaking a language. I always think of it as the multi-focused versus single-focused people. And Western business was built for single-focused people, mostly men, who can just do one thing at a time. And they can only hold one thing at a time in their head. Whereas the multi-focused, mostly women, not always, but mostly, are can think of lots of things. I think of it as sort of two different languages. And so talk a little bit about finding the balance between being you, but not so much outside the picture that you won't fit in or that you'll get pushback.
I love that question. I will say two buckets. The first bucket is to really understand who you are and what you bring to the table. What are your strengths? For me, my strengths is that strategy piece, the cross-functional leadership, and the energy I bring into everything I do. Now, those three pieces are very me, and I'm very confident, and I continue to develop those strengths to become the best me I can be. The second half is the one to understand how the business where you're working on it works. How do they drive decisions? For example, in the company where I'm at, and I'm sure many companies are in that bucket, is all about data and show me the data. Instead of showing the money, show me the data. And data speaks very loud. And with data, you can influence a ton, right? And then the other piece is that also the company is very competitive. So having that very wide external landscape and benchmarking and bringing that's how you influence and get your voice heard. So there's a combination of both. Understand really how your company makes decisions and being able to provide that. Now, the first piece, again, and I'm now speaking from my Latino heritage, it can sometimes feel like you're swimming against the current because, for example, for me, I'm a very energetic leader. I achieve results through the family, which we call my team. We call it the family. That is very different from what has been perceived as successful in the past. And because of that, people try to, I always think the best of the people. They're trying to coach you to be more like what has worked in the past. But let's be honest. The composition of this world is looking already very different from what it looked in the past. What worked in the past doesn't work. And maybe it feels a little bit like pushing against the current, but we need that kind of courage out there and more role models so people can see, right? The next generation can see that, yes, you can be authentic, you can be a Latina, you can be a female, and you can achieve your goals and be your authentic self. It's almost like breaking that cycle of creating the same type of leaders. And it's going to take patience and courage. But it is very worth it. And we're not doing it for ourselves anymore. We're doing it for the next generation.
Yes. Yeah. That's wonderful. I like to think about historical cycles. 30 years in the opera business, telling stories that from the 18th and 19th centuries that were based on stories from the Greeks. I have often wondered if this single-focused tendency in American business comes from the fact that it was run by men who had been in the military. So many, because this is the longest we've gone without being the whole nation at war, if you will. And so you had many, 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 many people, all male, for generations, who had been through wars and were used to that kind of structure. And that kind of top-down hierarchy, whereas which is not the same as a family.
We're not.
I mean, there's a hierarchy in a family, yes, but I think this is really exciting. One of the things that you said was there wasn't anybody who looked like you, and I know that you're the sponsor for the Latinx Employee Resource Group at your company. And it says Forbes in back of you, but this is not the company that she works for. So just those of you who are
Fearless.
Fearless. Oh, it looks like it says Forbes. Okay.
Fearless.
It says Fearless. All right.
I love anchors. It reminds us of things. And
Okay.
That's one of my anchors.
So in sponsoring the employee resource group for the Latinx employees, what are the ways that you see that people sabotage themselves?
Ooh, I love that. I'm an executive sponsor for them. Actually, not as executive sponsor, executive advisor for them.
Okay.
I love to talk about this, and there's so many different things that I can bring here. I'm going to focus on two. One of them is the way we're raised is to focus so hard on what we're doing. Results will speak louder than anything. Mm-hmm. So put your head down and work really hard because people will notice. And this is something that's just the way we're raised. And I'm telling you, that's something I did too. I worked so hard, but performance itself will take you until a certain point in your career. And as you well know, after that are things like personal branding, mentorship, sponsorship, that visibility. And I learned that the hard way. And this is why I love to talk about it, because especially I wanted to please and I wanted people to feel that they made the right decision by hiring me. And I would focus so hard on my job. But then after a certain point, I became invisible. I became lost in this little bubble called my work, because I was saying no to the things that were exposing me to mentorships and sponsorships and visibility, and I didn't know any better. And then when I saw other people getting the opportunities and the promotions, I said, well, that's not fair. But then I realized, no, Jenny, it's because you're not being very strategic with your career. And that's what I really love to talk about it. You drive your career, nobody else. And it takes a lot of intentional work to take you to get. The other one is that in our culture is very ingrained to not talk about yourself.
Yes.
And ¿qué dirá la gente? What will people say? And it's almost like bragging is an arrogant way of talking. You don't talk. That's why you achieve results through people and you talk about your team. But that plays against you in the corporate world, because especially during performance management, there's a lot of times that say, what did you do? And when I will respond, well, my team did this. And my team achieved this. And they will say, no, Jenny, what did you do? No, your team, what did you do? And for me, it was intuitive that I'm the leader. I'm the one leading and making these things happen. But I learned to adjust a little bit on how I would describe. And the other thing that I advise and coach people is it's a different mindset. It's not about talking about you. It's about expressing and articulating how can you best add value. Because people are not mind readers. And otherwise you're going to be the best kept secret out there. If they don't know how you can help, what do you bring to the table, what your strengths are, they don't know how to better place you in the organization to have the best value for the company. So this is why I keep saying you have to articulate your values.
Well, also it's for us to recognize our value and to say, oh yes, I did that with the help of my team. But that was my idea. And, and we are taught that, I don't know, my mother always said, good girls don't brag.
Yes.
So, stop talking about yourself. But the thing is, if you don't talk about what you've done and claim credit for it, somebody else will step into the vacuum and claim credit for something that was your idea. As we talk about this, I'm curious. So you're Associate Vice President and Head of Global Talent Acquisition, which means you're hiring people from around the world. So clearly you're hiring people of many different nationalities, many ethnic backgrounds. What are the qualities that you look for? And what are the qualities that you see where people sabotage themselves? I mean, is it just Puerto Rico and continental US where good girls don't brag, or is it worldwide? How do you see a lot? I'd be curious as to your thoughts.
That's a really good question. There is, in terms from a cultural perspective, and this is something that I am so happy about my company, because they did several employee journeys. And what they do is that they hire an external company and they do a lot of internal within the company market research about what is the journey, for example, a Black employee, a Latinx employee, Asian, LGBTQ, person with disability. And through that, they have been able to uncover moments of truth. And some of them are similar against all the people who are perhaps underrepresented, and other ones are very unique to their culture or their background. And I have been able to learn a ton of that. So what I've been able to do with my organization is equip them with that information, making sure that they're aware, so then they can recognize these little biases that may happen during an interview or when we are recruiting, how we can best connect with the talent. Representation is key. So the other things that I've done also within my company, within my organization, is having people that can connect with these people because they have similar background or similar circumstances. And that really, really has made a significant impact in how we hire and the people, the diversity that we bring from all the elements of diversity, right, that we bring into the organization. And then it's also been curious, the same thing I'm learning from a US landscape with each country. What are they seeing? How can I best partner with them? And how do we replicate the same type of framework in all the different countries?
Yeah, that's very interesting. You think about a chemical engineer from Kenya is not the same does not have the same experience as a chemical engineer who's also Black and from Atlanta, for instance.
Absolutely. And that's what I love to sometimes just get to know people from a personal perspective. What is your journey? It's not about having this degree and this other degree and these experiences. Like, what is your journey? You learn so much about the resilience, the way they connect the dots, the way they have to problem solve just through really learning what is your journey. Tell me your story. I love to ask this question because it speaks louder than many things, achievements that we call in a resume.
Well, it's one of the things that I learned early on training opera singers, actually, is that that your story is a sales tool. Even if you're selling yourself to your manager, I like to use the word enrolling. You're enrolling your manager into being on your team, or enrolling somebody like Jennie Lopez to hire me. Your personal story is part of that, and it makes sense to practice it. So as you talk about this, you had another great phrase when we were talking earlier about breaking the cycle of creating the same type of leader avatars, which is a great phrase. I want to make sure I pronounced it right. What did you mean by that?
You touched a little bit about that, Elizabeth, when you're talking about, I wonder if it's because of, let's go back to the United States, the nature of the leaders, and the background from a military background. For the longest time, they created this leadership style, and I've seen it in my company and many other companies, and that proved them successful. But that is not going to work in the future. And so we need to break that cycle, because and I have to be very grateful for the people before me, the females before me, the Latinas before me, because they had to feed that cycle to be able to get a voice and get to a certain place. Now we have the numbers, now we know better. And now we need to break that cycle and really put I always say, put a flashlight on the different type of leaderships. That's the true meaning of diversity, right? And inclusion is everybody has a different style, and it may be different from the past, but it's still very, very, very beneficial, valuable, and incredible. And we need to see more role models there, because if people don't see the role models, they continue to think, just as Jennie Lopez, when she was 22, that thought that the only way to achieve the goals was to be part of that avatar, and we need to
was a hide. Yes, right. Where would somebody start if they've been feeling for quite some time that it wasn't really safe to talk about who they were or where they were? I've been with my wife for 32 years. For the first 15 of those years, I always said, oh, my other half. The person I live with, never mentioned gender because it wasn't safe. where could somebody start if they're not, besides buying your book?
Yes, thank you. I love that. I was saying it goes hand in hand. The organization also needs to lead by example. They need to create an environment where people feel that it's safe, right? Psychologically safe to be who you are and voicing your story and just breaking any barriers so you can unleash the best of every single employee, every single person in your organization. And then as a person, you have to almost connect with a big why. You know, why is so important for you to share, to be the best you and to share you. For me, again, like I mentioned before, I wanted to become that role model I didn't have. Was it easy? No. Was it worth it? And did I have a bigger why? Yes. So that big why was what drove me whenever things were not easy, when things felt that monumental, to be able to continue to be my best me. So when I connected with my why, that drove me. But everybody has a different, I've seen a lot of people that have shared their story with me because I enable that. Like it's just maybe part of who I am. When you talk to me, it's almost, I'm myself at work the same way I'm with my kids, the same I'm with my students teaching Zumba. And people feel that they can trust me. And I have a lot of people who say, I can't believe I'm telling you this. You're the first person who I have shared this side of me. So I think if you have a big why, then you have a bigger reason other than yourself as of why it's important to bring your best you and your entire you.
That's wonderful. Well, before we go, I want to hear more about your wow emails, the words of wisdom. Talk to us a little bit about that, and we will put the link in the show notes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the words of wisdom is all about strategies and tools and actionable things that you can do to succeed in life and career. I think a lot of people focus, success is 80% mindset, right? And a lot of people focus on the training and the things that the actual things that they have to do, and they take for granted the mindset. So I do get a lot into the mindset space here. And it's one of the reasons I also wrote the book, right? Intentional Unicorn. And a lot of the things that are in the book, I break it down into even more details into these wows. And in the book, it's not just about my story because nobody wants to hear that. But what people want to hear is the lessons. Because when you go, for example, in LinkedIn, Elizabeth, what do you hear? I got this award and I'm humble. I got this promotion. You see all the highlights. You don't hear the down, the challenges, the struggles, the feedback. I'm not going to say failures. I'm going to say learnings, the painful learnings. And that's why I talk about Intentional Unicorn and the framework that I have on how to achieve any kind of goal.
Wait, you just flashed that cover at us. Show us the cover again. There it is. Intentional Unicorn. Okay. So if you're not watching us on video, I'm going to put a picture in I'll put a picture in the show notes as well, so you can see this.
Thank you.
Jennie Lopez, thank you so very much for joining us. This has been really fun. And although we've just discovered each other, you're going to be hearing from me a lot because I want to hear lots more about what you're doing, and we will go on. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. My guest was Jennie Lopez. I am Elizabeth Bachman, your host. And let me remind you, if you enjoyed this, please go to the website, to the podcast page on the website, and click on the link on how to leave a review. Review us and recommend us on Apple Podcasts. That's the one that counts. And whatever you feel about Apple, recommend us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on YouTube, and tell your friends so that I can bring more fabulous people like Jennie Lopez. Thank you, Jennie, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This has been Elizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.